Hello. So today we're actually going to present a challenge to you. We both love to read, and generally we each have kind of our genres we stick to. I know Sir Chunk mostly reads in the horror area, sometimes sci-fi and fantasy. I mainly read like contemporary thrillers and crime fiction and mysteries, but that doesn't mean we're opposed to kind of anything. And I'm always willing to like explore other types of books, but I never know where to start in certain genres. Or, I've had a bad experience in certain genres. So what we're going to do is go through various genres and kind of tell you some of the books we've liked in those genres and the elements we like from the genre and the things we don't like. And then we're going to call on you to make some recommendations, and hopefully we can like hobble together a list based on those recommendations for maybe like late summer for our TBRs. And so, yep, this is on you. Give us some books. He has nothing to say, apparently.
Books.
Okay.
Good words. Words read good. Books.
Okay. So the first genre is going to be fantasy. For me, like, I love A Song of Ice and Fire. I guess Harry Potter, which is, I suppose is fantasy, right?
Yes.
So I'm open to reading more fantasy, but one series tend to intimidate me. So if it's a series, I prefer it to be short because I don't want to be stuck with Wheel of Time kind of deal. Partially, I think I've been burned by George R. R. Martin, so I'm like, oh, I can't wait 20 years every time there's a cliffhanger. But one of the challenges I've been having is that people keep recommending fantasy novels to me, and they end up being like essentially romance, but like someone has a sword. I don't really like romance, and so I'm looking for, if I'm going to read a fantasy, I want it to be way more about the world building and the characters, but I don't want just a bunch of girls in dresses like trying to like marry the prince or something. Like, I don't care about that. And I don't want it to be so over the top and so outside of the reality of like my world that I get lost and confused. So something very similar to like, obviously, A Song of Ice and Fire, and I know that's pretty big ask, but something that's kind of based in realism, has some dragons and has, like a shy and places like that, but also the characters are really interesting, not heavy on the romance side, really focusing more on something else, whether it's palace intrigue or coming of age. I mean, Harry Potter has that, and there's like minimal romance in that. So, and it can be young adults, it can be adults. I'm pretty open to anything, but just something that's not basically a romance calling itself a fantasy novel. And Sir Chunk?
I've become quite the cynical person who I dislike almost everything. But historically, I like sort of high fantasy stuff, basically the stuff that's ripped off Tolkien and D&D, that kind of stuff. But I prefer things that are, at this point, a little creative, a little better, well done, not just the same recycled plot over and over again with the same recycled setting, preferably well written, or at least reasonably well written. I just hate garbage writing at this point, so even if the story's good, if the writing is pure crap, I can't cope.
All right, so give us some fantasy books, and that's, I know, kind of broad, but we haven't been able to really like get back into fantasy, and I know a lot of you read fantasy.
Brandon Sanderson guy is supposed to be good, I think.
Yeah, so tell us who you think we should read. We bought the first of the Joe Abercrombie, like something about a knife. I bought the first of his books because everyone just keeps talking about him, so we'll let you know what we think of that one once we get to it. So the next one is science fiction. In terms of science fiction, I'm open to anything in terms of science fiction. The only thing I can think of, honestly, that I've read that's really sci-fi is Illuminae. So I like things set, I like them set in spaceships. I like things that are in space set on, I really liked Season of Passage by Christopher Pike, which is set on Mars, which is basically mythology. But so I like that kind of science fiction, I guess. Pretty open, really, to anything science fiction. Again, just don't be romance, like stuck in a spaceship.
Obviously, I like a lot of science fiction, like Bradbury, Asimov, the classic dudes are all really great. I've read most of that stuff at this point. I do tend to like science fiction that takes place like in space more than sort of on Earth type of stuff. And like with every single genre I read, if it's a group of people trapped somewhere, dealing with something, yeah, that's what I want to read. Trapped in a spaceship.
Except he didn't like his last book, Trapped in a Spaceship. But again, don't disguise it as don't call it romance and disguise it as sci-fi.
That was a romance writer trying to write a sci-fi book and failing miserably.
So we're not going to say who it is. But anyway, so
I believe their name was Crap Sandwichson.
The next one is Dystopian, which is obviously a spin-off of science fiction, but I am a sucker for dystopian literature. I've read all the classic ones, and they're all in my favorites. So, 1984, Fahrenheit 451, Brave New World, all that stuff. I've read The Hunger Games, like The Maze Runner. I love dystopian. And again, this could be YA, it could be... At this point, though, I've read so many that I, don't want to read another series that's essentially The Hunger Games, just with a different setting. I feel like it got to the point where, in YA dystopian is every week there was a new YA dystopia, but it was pretty much the same book over and over. So, something that's new, but also if you know something that's dystopian, that's great. I am ready for that.
Yeah, I like dystopian. I read all the same stuff that you just listed. I'm also pretty sick of that kids versus the government thing. I've seen that absolutely beat to death. I love settings in dystopia. I feel like at this point I'd rather, instead of having the warm up to the story be here's how the world ended and now here's after it. I want a story about the ending. Give me the people as the world is imploding. I want a story like that leads into the dystopian.
Oh yeah, that would be really great. So rather than filling us in the backstory. Let us watch it fall apart. That would be really cool.
A puppy ate the moon and the earth died. No, okay, great. Tell me, I want to see that puppy chomping on that moon.
And then action adventure. And actually, this might be a sci-fi book, but I really liked, there's a young adult series, Life as We Knew It. And basically the moon gets too close to Earth.
Eaten by a puppy.
And ends up being nuclear winter or something. So it's really more survivalist. So I don't read a lot of action adventure, but I'm definitely open to it. I mean, I love Indiana Jones, so if there's a book version of it, I'd be super excited. Love The Mummy, that kind of stuff. I like people on adventures. I feel like I haven't found a lot of books like that, and I guess, he mentioned Treasure Island. I don't think I've read Treasure Island, or if I did, it was really young. I loved The Swiss Family Robinson as a kid, so I'm definitely open to some action adventure, and I feel like I just haven't made it into that area of books. I'm sure there's some great stuff out there.
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure that I've read too much of this either. For this genre, what I really like is an adult good version of Hatchet. Hatchet, I like the idea, but the book is virtually unreadable because it's written for 6-year-olds. So it's good for what it is, but it ain't for me. For example, Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon, that's awful. But that sort of thing, some dude surviving in the woods or something, that kind of thing interests me. For a survival-y adventure, or what the heck's that book about the guy in Antarctica and he's dying and he tries to voice. I don't know. I can't think of the name of it. Never Cry Wolf, maybe. Anyway, that kind of thing. I like one person trying not to get killed by nature.
Yeah, survivalist is kind of fun. Yeah. All right. So moving on, we have crime. And I know this can be broken into different areas. So in this case, we're talking specifically detectives, not necessarily solving a mystery, but the forensic and sort of criminal side of things, or noir. Noir is really fun, and I haven't found a lot of good noir in fiction. Or if I have, it's the old school stuff. It's the old Perry Mason books, and I could just watch the Perry Mason show. And I know it sounds terrible to say, but the books are just kind of old at this point, and they feel, to be honest, they're kind of racist and stuff. Some of these older books, I'm not saying the Perry Mason ones are, but some of those older detective stories, you're wow, this is kind of racist. So something that's a little more modern, but in that vein, I would love to try to read.
Yeah, I love noir in film and neo-noir in film, but in books, the ones I've read have never done much for me. I read some of Bradbury's noir, and I love Bradbury, but his noir just doesn't really work for me. I haven't really read Dashiell Hammett and those type of dudes. Maybe I should try some of that. But when I have gone for the noir detective fiction in books, it just has kind of fallen flat for me.
And then thriller and suspense. Sorry, I'm coughing to death.
Stop dying.
The thriller and suspense, This is my favorite genre. I love domestic thrillers in particular. Like, oh, these people have secrets, or oh, the whole town has secrets and you'll never know. And, sorry. And someone isn't who they say they are. And I know she married this man, and is he taking her money? I love Gillian Flynn. I love Paula Hawkins. I know they're kind of mysteries, but somewhere along those lines, love thriller and suspense. So if you can recommend any to me, I will try anything in the world of thriller and suspense for sure.
You sound like the evil sister from Pet Sematary right now. Your voice is messed up. Yeah, I don't know. I like thrillers, I guess. I'm trying to think of ones that I have read, and I can't think of a single one. But I'm sure that I've read some. I like feeling, suspense. So I guess I'm pretty open on this to any that are good.
And actually keep the romance out of these too. Like, I do not go for romantic suspense where it's like, oh, this man kidnaps this woman and then, like, abuses her and then they fall in love. Like, no, that is... Stay far away from me with that stuff.
God, that's terrible.
All right, I'm going to hold on so I can cough to death. Okay, so the next section is mystery, which is my other, like, big place that I love. Obviously, I like Agatha Christie. I mean, I like everything from Agatha Christie to modern mystery. Right now, I really like Ruth Ware, Alice Feeney. Who else do I like? I like Gillian McAllister. And I some of these mix in between, like, thriller and suspense and mystery. I mentioned Gillian Flynn, Paula Hawkins, like, that kind of stuff. I really love, like, if you can find me, like, the equivalent of Broadchurch, like, I love mysteries where everyone in the town, it happens in a small town and everyone's a suspect. And there's a reason for everybody to be a suspect. Like, that stuff, I eat it up. One of the things I found, and so if you can find, like, a good YA mystery or thriller, I would be very happy. But I feel like I feel like it's kind of insulting to, like, and this is from someone who writes YA, I do feel like sometimes there's this attitude that, like, oh, they don't care about, like, the, like, realistic logistics of the mystery. They just care that it's fun. And that's great and all, but, like, I find myself going, none of this would work. This is not feasible. Like, oh, well, the teacher did it, and, I'm like, people would notice if the teacher was, like, slowly murdering off their students. So, like, I just think, like, so I think I need something that, like, does feel like it could happen. And so, if you have some YA recommendations, they need to be sort of founded in reality. Where I find, like, the adult ones, I think there's a little more, like, thought put into the reality. I like Peter Swanson. I mean, I like pretty much anything I've read in the mystery world. Like, so if you have any more recommendations in mystery, always happy to try a mystery.
Mystery in particular, I really like lock room mysteries that are, like, tight and to the point, and, like, most of the details are there for you, but it's written cleverly enough you can't figure it out until they reveal it. To me, that's the best mystery. They give you all the information you need to solve it, but it's too clever, so you can't solve it till they reveal it. Mo-ho. That's what I like.
Yeah, definitely. And then there were none. That's what we like.
Yeah.
And then in horror, I love horror, but I am particular, like, about horror. I love psychological horror. I like really, some of my favorites are things like, obviously I'm thinking of Ending Things. I mentioned the Last House on Needless Street. Those are more modern. And then I love, for Stephen King, like, I love The Shining. I like Pet Sematary. I like that kind of older, and like Carrie, where it's not fully, it's horror, but it's very based in reality. And it's like, it's really more about, like, what people do. I don't have any interest in, like, animal abuse. And it's, like, you can send me the most messed up, like, horror that's about people doing horrible things. Like, I feel like I'd be fine reading, like, the equivalent of, like, Human Centipede, like, book. Doesn't bother me. Like, it does, for some reason, I can totally read it and be fine. I'm like, I guess I'm well aware of the horrible things human beings do to one another. And so it doesn't really faze me. But if it's too graphic in its descriptions of animal abuse, like, I'm out. Like, I read The Wasp Factory, and, I mean, I found myself having to skim huge chunks of it because it was just too awful and disgusting, with, like, the killing and then, like, and the body horror. I can't do it. So anything that's like too much with animals, I'm out on those. But otherwise, I'm pretty open to horror. Oh, I don't like a lot of like monster things. Like The Mist by Stephen King, I enjoyed until it turned out that there was like something in the mist. Like I was really into it being like just a bunch of people going insane and like turning on each other because of like this supernatural force. But then like I was kind of hoping there wouldn't be anything in the actual monsters, and then monsters showed up, and I was like, eh.
She's wrong. The Mist is awesome. Also, didn't you just see the movie and not the book?
No, I read the book, and I hated it. You gave it to me.
Well, you're dumb. The book is great. The Mist is awesome. I also hate body horror. So it's anything that's focusing, like, essentially, it's like what makes it horror is just overly descriptive gore. Like, I don't mind some gore, but, like, if that's the whole point, I'm not interested. No animal stuff for me. I love stuff in creepy settings. Set it in a big creepy house, set it around Halloween, put it in a graveyard. I like it. That's what I want. Sort of old school, cool mood. I love settings. That's what makes horror to me a really cool setting.
But he likes monsters. Like he can do monsters. If you have
I don't mind. It doesn't have to be monsters. I don't give a crap if it's monsters or not.
But like I love the horror. Like just to kind of clarify, like I love the Blair Witch Project. I like the horror where my imagination does more than you throwing like some like werewolf at me. Like just I'm not interested in like the actual monsters. So mine is more like, what do you call it?
Ass hattery?
Okay, psychological. He can read anything. He can read monsters. He's cool with that. So just to be clear. And then on historical fiction, I've read very little historical fiction. I always want to read historical fiction, but I always tend to find, I mentioned this recently with like the Pillars of the Earth, is like a lot of historical fiction, I feel like the person really wants to show off how much research they did on that period. And I find myself like half of it being like, am I reading a textbook? Like, great. I'm glad you have all this expertise, but it's not fun to read. So I need historical fiction that reads like contemporary fun fiction.
I feel attacked.
Why do you feel attacked?
Because of all my genius research I did for my historical fiction.
Right, but like I think it just needs to move in a way where it feels like a normal narrative, and it's not just like here's a random historical fact, and it feels like it's being forced in there just so people are like impressed by your knowledge. So I've read Pillars of the Earth. I've read I think Sarah's Key was historical fiction. I read something else recently. I can't remember what it was. But I don't have a time period either. Like I'm open to anything. Obviously medieval. If it's in Britain, especially if it's in like the Victorian period, I'm very happy. I like things like the turn of the century, like, the 20s and stuff as well. So really I'm open to a lot of historical fiction. I just feel like I haven't found the right historical fiction.
Yeah, I want the historical elements to be the setting and not necessarily the core elements of the story. Give me a good story set in a cool time period where like you're truthful to the time period and maybe even drop in a few fun like Easter eggs that like only people who are like keen on the time period will get. I like that kind of stuff, but I don't want it to be like overwhelmingly the entire situation. Time periods to me that like Middle Ages, American Revolution, feudal Japan, maybe even World War II. I like the big ones, like the ones that everybody likes.
And westerns.
And westerns,
he loves
right?
Westerns.
I'm a top 10 kind of person. I like the time periods I think everybody likes. What can you do?
All right, so for contemporary, I love contemporary. Contemporary fiction is like my favorite. I mean, I like contemporary mystery, obviously, like when it's a genre that's contemporary, but I do love, I like contemporary fiction about like nonsense as well, like where it's just, oh, these people are doing some things. And I'm fine with that. Like, I love, some of my favorite movies are just people being sad in contemporary times. And so if you have that, like, I am all about it. I don't care about people's, like, families. Like, I know that sounds awful, but, like, I feel like so much contemporary fiction is, like, and then, the struggle because, they got divorced, and then, the family is like torn because one of the children is like estranged. I don't care. Like it doesn't work for me. Maybe it's just because I don't have kids and like it's not relevant to me. I don't like romance. I'm gonna stress that. At the end, okay, I have something to say about the romance thing, but like honestly, I just want it to be. I'm reading A Little Life right now, and so that's kind of contemporary, and like I like that. That's a little more literary fiction. But, like, I like that. I like just people, like, doing their things. I love Sisterhood of the Traveling Pants. That's a contemporary. I know it's YA, but that's what I like. Contemporary YA is what I write. So, I mean, that's my thing. So, if you have any recommendations.
For contemporary fiction, I don't really care about people or humans or the existence of the world. So what I really want to hear is something satirical or sarcastic or particularly witty or humorous. If it's going to be contemporary fiction, I need it to be sort of having some kind of insightful mockery of existence. That's what I'm interested in. Because if it's just about, like, people and their lives, even if it's really well written, which most contemporary fiction is not, I'm probably not going to give a crap about it.
All right, then moving into literary fiction, I mean, I was an English major, so I love the classics, so I can totally handle literary fiction. The problem with literary fiction, I find, is that often it's like, it tries too hard to be literary. Like, I feel like they were just so committed to, like, I'm using big words. And, like, sometimes, like, it works. You know, like I said, I'm reading A Little Life right now, and there are definitely times where I'm like, I don't think you needed to use that word. Like, they're, like, it's just obviously trying to be very, like, literary. But, I mean, I'm open to literary fiction that's good. I mean, obviously, I love words. I love classics. I like literature as a whole. So I'll read anything. But, again, I don't really, like, it just doesn't work when it's, like, 3 generations of this family and their life struggles as, like, a family, like, and that's a big thing in literary fiction, and it's really hard for me to care. When it's, like, just, like, one situation. I know, I mean, I guess technically All the Light You Cannot See is historical fiction, but I think that's supposed to be, like, literary, and I started it, and then I haven't been able to get back to it, but that seemed good. I'm trying to think of any, like, I read something called, like, I don't even remember the name now, so.
That does sound good.
But, like, I think, like, White Noise is considered literary fiction. That appeals to me. So, you know, those kind of books interest me. But if you know of something.
Yeah, I mean, would Book Thief be literary fiction?
Probably, I would say
right.
so.
So I'm just trying to think, like, most literary fiction that I read is from dead people. And so, like, you know, they've been good and people know them for a long time. So if there are new writers, so what I like to do is I like to look up best written books in the last 10 years, and then I pull books randomly off that list and I read them. And usually I don't like them because, well, I mean, to be fair, I don't like much of anything because I'm a jerk. But if you do happen to know a book that's particularly well written with a good story, so as Coleridgegirl pointed out, sometimes people get hung up on, I'm going to write the purplest prose that ever purpled in Prosetown. And their story is garbage. I'm like, well, that's not any good. Like, you're not trying to write a poem here. You're trying to write a story. So you got to sort of naturally work well-crafted text in with your good story. That's hard to do. If you know of any, I'm happy to hear them.
Yeah, like, I love the classics, too. And, like, just because you got your MFA, I don't need to hear about, like, I don't care about your story about your MFA either. And, like, a bunch of people in their MFA programs, like, it seems like a literary fiction a lot of times will go to that. It's like, just write something like the good writers, you know? If you can write a Hemingway or Fitzgerald type book, I want it.
Right, your life is boring. Even if you use the word vacuity once in a while, it doesn't mean it's good.
All right, so moving into nonfiction, I will read anything in nonfiction, but it has to be, like, for me, it has to be written narrative. Like, I don't want to just read a textbook. I mean, I've done it, you know, I've had to do it for school. But if I'm going to pick up nonfiction on, like, my own time, it has to feel like, it doesn't feel like fiction, but I don't want it to feel like I'm reading a book, you know, like a textbook. So something like I liked, there's like a book called Habit. I enjoyed that. I like The Quiet. It's a little more narrative. I love, the guy's name, is it Krakauer, who writes like they're basically like fiction novels, but they're not. They're, you know, about real stories, like Into the Wild. I heard like Devil in the White City is really good. That's been on my TBR forever. So that kind of stuff, you know, where it's almost like a novel, but it just happens to be real. The one thing I don't like, surprisingly, even though like I love mystery, is I do not like true crime. Because for me, one, I don't like that it doesn't get wrapped up and there's not really like a closure in it. But I can like read books about horrible things people do to each other, but knowing it's fiction At least I could be like, I know people do these things, but these aren't actual people doing these things. When I get into true crime, I just start getting really depressed because then I'm like, oh, wow, these people actually did these things, you know? And so I still need it to be fiction. So that's one of my big caveats, I guess, is that I don't like true crime, and everyone always finds that surprising.
Yeah. There's not too much nonfiction that I can really get into. I guess most of the stuff that I get into is historical stuff where someone's breaking down the strategic fails or accomplishments of generals in war. That kind of stuff interests me for some reason. And then I like stuff that's about space. If you're gonna be hey, here's 200 pages about the atmosphere of Neptune, well, I'll probably read that.
All right, so those are some things we like, and so give us some recommendations. And my challenge for you, if you want an extra challenge, is to find me a romance novel I actually like. And I feel like you're not going to be able to do it. So if you think you can find me a romance novel I like, then you'll get extra points. I don't know what there's no points and no award.
Twilight book you might enjoy.
Oh my God, please don't give me romance. But if you can come up with one, I will be very impressed. What about you? What is the one thing you think no one can find for you?
A book I will like.
Yeah, that's true. He's super difficult. But all right. So we're excited to see what you come up with. Thanks. Bye.
Boop.